YouTube is live, waiting for Twitch as usual. But when I check the footage later, it usually shows. So I'll start. So, yes, today is Thursday. Yes, it is. So hello everybody. Yesterday's stream ended with some frustration, but I worked on the same problem later on. And I think there's some good news. Demonstrate what I've done. Hopefully we'll find a happy medium between this new method and revising yesterday. So a bit of recap. We started with this interactive script. I believe we actually have interactive scene as well. There you go. So the plan was to create a group node here for keeping positions. Presentation node that will actually keep the model so that we give a visual component to this interactive scene. And that if this is a raised bed and if it's going to contain other plants, so this should also have contents area to show other interactive items. So then this structure is nested inside the contents of other. But to create the initial objects, we started to write first this interactive script that would let us select things in the inspectors so that we would easily create an eggplant or maybe tomato, that sort of thing. For trellis, it would actually have position data so you would know in which slot, which part of the model you could start growing things. Because in a raised bed situation, like maybe it's the center of the unit, but we have some models where the model may have multiple spots where plants could grow from. That's going to be kept under position. So this work was successful to a certain extent, but we realized that the drop-down list would be too long. I think there was one more limitation, but anyway, this model, after the struggles that I mentioned, to make it more efficient, we start to write this script, which I labeled at the time nonsense. With this model, the idea here is that actually this is working right. That we would actually have a drop down of 2 items, equipment and planting. Based on this selection, we would have another drop down list, and the second drop down list would be populated based on the selection. So we were basically writing inspector elements. This actually turned into a tool development, developing this game. I was trying to write conditional script variable so that it would not always be exposed, and also the value might. That led us to this where we override the get function, set function, and these two work in tandem with get property. This is, as you might also see, this is actually an interesting function because this mechanism lets you add group logic. So you could actually have things like this. This is the kind of question I was asking yesterday. By default, or through some mechanism in the game engine, these 3 properties are not exposed to the inspector alone, but they are grouped under transforms. You're actually expanding the group, and then you interact with the property. So I wondered if we could actually create something, because I was thinking maybe if I actually do this sort of conditional inspector variables through grouping, but grouping is just grouping. It actually doesn't change. So that work actually led us to discovering this get property list method, which is good because this is only adding these elements on top of your explicitly defined. So you could actually have, um, let's go back to this script. When you export variables so that they are available in the inspector, there's a great deal of simplicity in writing one line of code like or other variables. You wouldn't want to necessarily write things like this. So it's like, well, what happens when you want to access the variable? What happens when you want to change the variable? How do you expose it to the interface? Because how your variables will display here, say this is a Boolean value, so it's either on or off, so it's represented as a checkbox. So you could actually have a great deal of customization here through this method. But for simple things, if by default the game engine is doing that for you, writing something like this is just too. Luckily, you could still use this for custom cases, so you could keep some of your cases very simple, and only for more extreme cases you could actually granular. Thankfully, um, this is um, this is actually what we need now that we've discovered this. Let's say now that I discovered how this is done, now we can actually change this to fit our use case. Because otherwise I was going to go back to somewhat manual way of instantiating. And if it's still not clear what I'm talking about, the best of my capability, I'm going to demonstrate this. When we have an eggplant model, this is just the model itself. This model normally will have 5 or 6 different phases. So you seedling, growing phase, fully grown. There's like the fruit, but it's unripe. There's a ripe case, and then there's the withering case. So for one eggplant, you are going to have 5 or 6 mesh instance stacked. But this by itself uh, is just a model's representation. This has no game play logic. So the goal is to wrap this inside an interactive object so that the visual representation is under an interactive object. But when this file is saved, that is going to be the real eggplant game object. So this is just the eggplant model, which is this. I guess I was also messing up references there. Anyway, this is normally going to open this stuff. Anyway, because this is what you are seeing here. This is just the eggplant model, but this root node, when this is saved in the file system, that is actually going to game object. So then maybe we will actually rename models separately. Might be eggplant dash model. Then this, when this is saved, that is actually eggplant because it's going to have some game logic. Now you might ask, well, position data for an eggplant. What is the meaning of this? So let me pull up the trellis example. This one. The way I'm imagining this interactive workflow. An eggplant is an interactive item. Players will be clicking an eggplant to harvest it or Players may also want to click a trellis to start planting. So a trellis like this will have, by our estimations, maybe 5 or 6 nodes for keeping position data. Meaning, so when you look from top, this is essentially, if you divide in half, one unit to grow something, another unit to second plant. We could also designate 3 or 4 points along this bottom board, so that if you have crawling plants, they are going to use this surface to crawl up to. So you could essentially grow 2 plus maybe 3 or 4 different plants. This is an interactive object, and this may actually have position data, so that the game logic knows, okay, this position is being used, planted into a different position. So this kind of information may not be pertinent to eggplant. And in that case, we are just going to delete all this. And actually, we made this part dynamic too, so we could actually apply 0 all this in, or maybe 3 or 5. We don't have to. But even for eggplant, keeping position data might be relevant in a case like this. Say our models, they always have 5 or 6 or 7 eggplant, the fruit itself, the edible part. So I don't think at this point it's viable to have an option, but if the player wants to click this fruit or this fruit, each one of these could actually be handled. This will actually have 7 position. So in essence, in interactive objects, node model is representation to hold the other interactive objects under contents and just to keep. There was some discussion whether this position data might be the same thing as the coordinate of the interactive object under contents. It might be. If it's going to be like that, then I should actually make this node type a position 3D. So then this root node being under contents is going to act like a position 3D. Then maybe we won't actually need this, because then each content having another interactive object being a position 3D, then then everything is kind of by its position. So that is still something we'll see as we go. But I think today what we can do is to merge some of this logic we wrote yesterday that was actually populating the positions node with the number of positions the player wants to see. Some of this work that we have here, this condition. Because if I could pull this off, the beauty of it will be, thanks to this tool keyword, that I will have this interactive scene open. I will be selecting things here. This will call tomato plant. It will pre-populate representation. I'll be saving this file as a tomato plant. I'll move on to another item. It will pre-populate it for me, so that I'm not actually manually doing this kind of work and adding the number of positions and adding some. So this is kind of a blueprint. So good template to start with. Bit of chocolate for lunch substitute. Get some work done, and then maybe lunch will. So let's look at the interactive script. Yeah, I like the simplicity of this. This is responsible for creating positions here. If I remove nonsense script, but load the interactive script, that it's already working. So look at the looks hard-coded 5. Change it here. Why is this still move it? Maybe I didn't interactive. So this comes with positions -1 because it's the first time we load, and there was some discussion whether we could actually keep the existing data. But look here, it's 5. If I actually type 2 and tab out, it's actually going to initialize the number of. I think after the first run, this actually stays the same. Even when we save the file and reopen it, it stays the same. But maybe first time finding it. This is where actually the whole discussion started. I actually made some progress here. This was finding the correct model and putting it under representation. But then this list will be too long. That's where the conditional drop-down list discussion started, which led us to this nonsense. It wasn't so easy to do that kind of conditional rendering with this kind of simple script variable declaration. That's why we need mechanism. But thankfully, we could actually merge simple cases with more. So I'll bring some stuff from nonsense into this. You'll see our frustration from yesterday when we tried things. Let's see. So we will essentially have something like this model type. Actually, to so this list has to be compiled based on this. I mean, heck, there could even be a 3-step drop down. First planting, then you choose vegetables, then you choose. And we were talking about having multiple varieties of tomato. That would be the 4th step. But maybe we'll combine all the varieties in this list. Just going to write a quick comment in the section so that people who join will see what we are aiming. So essentially what we are trying to do is abstracting object. I want to move things around so that simple cases are the simple case, it's working beautifully. I'm going to move this to the top. Frustrating parts will be this representation should be context dependent. So those names, as far as I know, we will have right now. I have some models for equipment, but they are not exactly broken down. Vegetables or herbs or mushrooms, just equipment. That's actually okay. Let me look at the model list here. Do I have any herbs? I think herbs will be closed in. If anything, there's one flower, and that may be sliced. So for the time being, we are writing this with the hope that it will be depended upon. So, vegetables. And most likely I'll be writing so okay, I think this script is going to give an error. Just trying to run the game. Let me see what I did here. There's tools and structures. Okay. Tools, some tools, structure. So an example to tools is shovels. Is I think either done last night. I have to check our Discord to see if the repo or zip file. Don't see it's here at or the way they are named fake shovels. Still don't see that. There's raccoon, there's sparrow, squirrel, watering can. None of that exists. I'll be doing them. So let's actually look in here. Double click. So here's a rake. Beautiful looking model. Seeing the texture reference. What's that? Here's a beautiful rake. Oh, shovel. This is here's your shovel. It has that pointy tip. Here's a flat and a spading fork. So far, so cool. And that's good. So each one of these will be exported. They will have their individual for tools. We will have pointy shovel, flat rake. For structures, we will have cold frame, for example. Now, where do you put bag of dirt? Is it a tool? Is it a structure? The thing. There is trellis. That's a structure. Cold frame and cold frame and okay. That's that for now. So the goal right now is to show equipment and planting in the script variables, and that when once equipment is chosen, you could have another drop down that shows tools and structures. When once tools is chosen, then we get to see this list as a third drop down. And when the developer chooses structures, then it will list this guy. That's what we are supposed to. This is no longer valid because this is the simple way of doing it. This is actually causing trouble right now. We might need some data reading. Create position. It's all good. It's working. So you turn yourself on. Now, save this. Go to now. This is where I should be getting stuff. So first of all, I will have a get and go there. Just pass. And we also need score get property. Also, now we don't really need a group logic. There is going to be an array that we append a dictionary. We will return that array. This is where the conditionals. First, start with this. Whatever you do, you will return this property list. Now, this is where we are going to have property list append. First of all, let's first render that equipment and planting. Every property list must have a name. The name will be, in this case, model type. Okay. Also must have a type. This is where I was extremely confused yesterday. For enum and dictionary type of things, sorry, not for enum and array, whatever you see is index based. So essentially, this is implicitly 0 and 1, unless you explicitly say this is 3. So when you choose a value, you're essentially choosing either 0 or 1, not equipment or planting. So you kind of have to convert that index in textual representation. Because in the end, we are going to need to read the text, not the index number. So we could actually find a model here called eggplant or pointy shell. So the type here is, I believe, still is. And here goes the hint stuff. And fortunately, it doesn't offer you code completion because it doesn't quite know what kind of dictionary it's supposed to be. The hint is here, property hint. I believe this was supposed to be enum because that's how it renders. Drop down. I could always go and look at the nonsense, but I'm trying to remember so that I'll feel that I have actually learned. The missing link, which actually made this thing useful, was the string part. Because unlike other hint types, say if this variable that we are exposing to the script, if it is a color, which is like a string hexadecimal color, when you type hint here as color, this actually puts a color box in the inspector. You don't need to do anything extra. But I noticed that with the enum, kind of needed to pre-populate that, so it needs a string representation. So this hint string is actually giving us that. So if you actually do something like this, this is where I may have to go and check. No nonsense, but I think this was an array of strings. So if you do something like this, I know that I have 2 elements in model type. So here's just 2 strings as the hint string for model type. So if I save this, and actually we have already a success. case here you see A and B. The reason why you see it that way because it's splitting the array in the middle like this, so it's kind of weird. You actually need to kind of join this. Unfortunately, this doesn't exist in Godot for normal arrays, but you need to make it a string array, which is represented as full string array. So this actually exists. So you do it this way. Save. Work. We are going to successfully see A and B. So A in this case is equipment, B is planting. But why would you want to hard code equipment and planting here? Because you're already keeping that kind of difference. This is where we have to do keys and values running on an. Now this is something I have not tried last night, whether it is going to accept an enum and will actually convert it to full string array, and it does not. Going to say, well, they're trying to put a dictionary inside a method that accepts array. But this is what we can do. This is actually this is going to give us an array. This array is going to become full string array, except when we say values, what we see here is representation. In reality, the value is actually an array. Arrays 0th index, first index is equipment. So here, you actually need to get the key. That will give you equipment. Now we have most beautiful case, most simple case. We have this thing exposed to the interface. And these two guys are only handling what happens when you make selection or when you want to access the value. It's still sitting there. Because sometimes you'll make a change somewhere else, but you want to read the value that is here. Since you won't be changing this, how can you kind of read the value? Because that should actually be set. So to get the value, you actually write this function. It's a kind of a paradoxical. So this is very promising. This looks as simple as possible with this extra bit of work. Yesterday's confusion, in essence, this sort of thing you have to write it. I tried to come to this situation, this end result, without writing this. I thought I could write something like this, which actually did its job to a certain extent. We were able to render it like, but the difficulty is if this is going to conditionally render another drop-down list, which we're about to do, we're about to do just after this, that was not possible with the most simple case of exposing things. Because there is no conditional logic in the way you just write these. You can't create conditional variables at this stage. But if you have a list or like a array that you are conditionally appending or not, based on the values that you are getting, going to be this, then you could actually dynamically change the way the script variables. So let's actually do that. So when we want to get, what are we trying to get? If the property we want to get is model type, then what are we trying to return? And I think this is where I was maybe creating extra variables, like maybe model type with the m lowercase. So that the uppercase model type is just a reference type, but the lowercase m model type is how we keep the variable. This is where I'm still not 100% sure. But actually, you know what? Before we do this, let's sort of complete the work that we are visioning. So similar to model type, we have vegetable. Let's expose that vegetable like this, because now we bind multiple there. This is going to be vegetables. This is going to be, when I save this, I have this. Now this list, this one should be conditional on what is selected in. That's what is going to happen in here. So first of all, if I think this is where the other script was doing, list ABC is true, only then will you append. So I think this is where I'm gonna have to create a different variable to use. Or if model type is model type vegetables or planting, if it's planting, only then will you append. Otherwise, if it's equipment, let's actually go with this simple model. Still testing. Okay, let's also separate this. It's equipment. Don't care about whether it's a tool or structure. We don't care whether the planting is vegetable or herbs or mush. Just the tools. Let's just pretend it's vegetables or. Here's your tools. All good. All good. Let's save this. Something blew up. Write this up. It is basically saying 3 times emailed operands dictionary here, because this is actually 0 or 1. What is this? This is where I need to check it again. This. Partly because I'm also not getting it. But I might actually kind of what I'm doing. Here's the reference type, and here's actually value itself. In case of this, without enum, the way they did it, it's still actually referring to a variable, to the reference. I must have some solid thing. So when by default, you could actually do something. Let's try. So then here, we do not pass. Will return what? If it's model type, you're essentially returning the value of model, just the reference. That reference type is followed here. And similarly, it's set because we are going to change the storing it. If the property we are interacting with is the uppercase model or the title case model type in the inspector, the variable itself will be the value. So that we could actually, so that when we actually do this check here, we actually have to do it against the variable itself. This is what I'm talking. So equipment is showing pointy shovel. If I change this to planting, I still see tools. Oh, okay. This is all good, but as you can see, when I'm changing it to planting, there is something going on with the methods right here. Property list change note. So the game engine has to be notified that the property list has. Uh, there was some. We still have some syntax here. Invalid operand string. Oh, okay. String. So now it thinks, oh, okay, the values are coming in a string. So is no longer because this is an integer. When we actually store the data, thanks to it could also be that I'm forcing it to actually may blow up. Let me actually see if I actually in the end I decide to go with string. I did not do this fancy work in interactive here yet, but or maybe certain extent simple. I'm kind of going in the stream mode. This is the okay. We are on the right track for sure. There's something good going on here. Just trying to see if debugger will have. Actually, for the rest of the game, is anything all rest of the game and where it's crying out loud. Let's see, when we set the value, what is the value? Oh boy, the value is a dictionary. It's not cool. Of course, when you do the check, that's what this is complaining about. Why are you comparing a dictionary to a string? Give method operand. String against dictionary. Why are we getting a dictionary? So look at nonsense. Did I forget? Usage is default. I thought there was already established. Maybe I do have to. Let's put it. Let's not rule out any same error. Okay, that's interesting. Planting is now registered. It's actually staying here. This is not updated, but this is still sort of problematic, but getting there. Getting there. It's only doing this. So it thinks of model type equipment all the time. But only then it will see, but never vegetable. So this if is always failing. This if is always winning. The fact that this is set to equipment because I set it to equipment, and that means this is never real. And yet when I do the planting, model type should. So what is actually model type? What am I? Model type. Oh, what am I? I am an integer. Which is kind of like this. Sort of like in. Ew, okay, so could it be that like it's actually getting planting or thing that you could actually there would this work? There. This is let's go back to that integer model because I was second guessing myself. I tried to do because this is still checking against int. This is where I'm trying to convert planting into this implicit zero, and this might actually this doesn't really, still failing it. This is so close. Let's double check get. It is just get. We're checking if it's like unless I actually did this wrong. Oh, okay. Another thing. If property equals model type, is this even returning anything? If we are not reading the value, and if it's always reverting to some default value, and so the planting is registered, or let's say blah blah blah. Okay. Blah. It's failing so badly, it's not even. So a better question might be, what is the property? What property are clear yourself. Huh. Close mode. So it's actually trying to get all these properties. I'm glad this is a simple object because this list sometimes is so long. Script. So none of this is including our variable name property. It's as if this is it? This is this. Oh, yeah. This is variable names. It's model type. Just return the block. However, the fact that this property model type. Okay, forget about your initial value. This is an interesting case. How it's comparing string to int and then string to dictionary. Interesting. And this is where I'm kind of messing up with the string. And also, this is where I screw. It's different. Okay. Similar. Set to. Of course, this if condition is here, and this is where I will. What am I? I am now. Can start with an initial condition or equivalent. Okay. Getting somewhere. Now, I still think I should insist on. I think this is where the problem is. I'm explicitly writing strings there, and yet I'm trying to keep data in. So when I'm checking here, or sorry, when I'm assigning stuff here, am I assigning a string? I think it's an integer, but then maybe the value that's coming in is a string. So then when I'm checking it here, I'm checking a string value against an integer value that is actually model type. If this is a string, um, it should not be a string parameter. What if instead of assigning strings here, just plain string? What if these strings also acted like your email? So it looks like it's been almost an hour, 5 minutes. So maybe a short break, and I think maybe something here is gonna be more obvious to me. So a short break, and Okay. I apologize to the viewer who just connected before I hit the break screen. He watches the stream later. I hope he or she finds this okay. So we have made some progress here. We have a conditional rendering for sure, because only tools is listed, not both vegetables tools. But the conditional case is failing right now because the model type value that we are checking against the enums is having some difficulty here resolving to the proper data type. And so we have the invalid operands here, and say what am I? It's 0. So it's clearly integer. So this is actually 0 because we are actually seeing it. So we are comparing it against a string. Because when this says, this doesn't necessarily mean in the order of like string and int, like string and int. I don't think it's that. It could be. It actually makes much more sense. So the best way to know that, well, it is 0, yeah, but what is the type of? Here's actually value. Some kind. Then what am I? So my data type is 2. So now we have to go and read the documentation about data type. Things, instance, iterations. Somewhere here we have type. Or 2. Type is integer. It's interesting. So this value 0 is actually integer 0, string 0. This is cool. So model type is indeed integer 0. And the fact that it's complaining, it thinks of this as string, which can only mean that this hint string is doing us, which is what I was trying to maybe suggest we do differently. Is why can't we render this as a string, but essentially the value is so this is that, right? Model. We actually do something. What if instead of this, here's 0 and 1. It's let's write this in. What if we, but this is already being done. This one, sort of. When we don't have any of this, this was yesterday. So we do need some. And as much as I do this, this might actually work. Does not. Now it thinks of the 0 as a string 0. Write this. I'll roll that out later when it starts. Anything is if I'm outputting this, okay? Type of model type is but what is this one? What is this? That is 1. This is the second thing here. I put equipment. I bet if I got the type of this, this, that's integer. So that was expected. So this is integer. Model type is integer. And yet when we do the comparison, integer to is I'm making a typo somewhere. So what am I is integer type value is 0. This one is model type plant is integer to value wise. It's this should actually fail because checking against planting. This one should be okay because so if I change this, this should both say 2020, which means this case should, if it is the case, okay, so here's something, should only fire when it's, this should never fire. Don't fire me, okay? Here it is, it will never be fired. So this is actually okay. So what are you complaining about? So if model type 0 equals, only then I, I don't want to believe the error is here. Okay, first of all, what is the value? Yeah, this is the factor value. When you are setting a whole dictionary, this is weird. You're assigning a model type. Okay, no, this is actually meaning, because all these values will be coming in to be set against properties. If that property happens to be model type, then only assign that model type's possible values that should be assigned to that. If the value that is coming looks like it should be different variable, then you do, it's fine. That is actually okay. But we could discuss the whole value system, because most likely you should just one value, not the whole dictionary. But this is actually technically should be doing here is what properties are you, where things, we are trying to set the tools property model type. It's like, well, why is this uppercase? That should be lowercase. And I don't think it's actually finding it. So maybe this should be uppercase because of this, but then the value is tracked in. Should work out. This is the dictionary that, and then of course doing it like not going to fire because also this is, this never fires. It never knows what property, so it actually said more. I'm not too hung up on keeping an enum here. think we are approaching that possibility where it could be an array. Especially if we are already converting that enum into keys so that we could do the join operation to get array string, array of string. Because then string and then the type is int is just all over the place. Okay, so let's do this. Var model types. Okay, here are this. I think we could do one better. Could already have pull string. So then we could just do something. Do not do model types. Equipment. Then there is no such thing as normal conditions. And now int is basically saying here are model types. You just join. Actually, I kind of want to see if I don't type model type is actually, this is where we might actually do match. For now, equipment. Actually, oh, let me just pull this here. Here. Shit. And you are going to be string. None of this is true anymore. Harmless. Good. It's not freaking out. It's not working either, but this is where I might actually sort of it, because now everything is a string. So maybe all this time we kind of failed at the data type, basic data. Mm-hmm. Here's what you are. You are data type for string equipment. You are a string. You are not an int. Therefore, this comparison is failing at this level. We are trying to register a string representation as here. Leave theory of utilizing enums failed me. There, so I probably need to throw in a few here and there. think this is also where we are doing things. Just going to take this and put it in a tool that I wrote from me I could remember. Let's see. I think it was regex string. Let's go to GitHub. It's there. Regex string. So here's the path. So paste this here. Okay. First of all, we are trying to do something. We are trying to find every it's like this. We are trying to replace it by whatever you found. $1 found. What's $1? But this should also be whatever you find. I'm not capturing it until then. This should also be continuous. There you go. You should keep the comma. That's it. Then next thing you should do is that every time you find this, place it with your square brackets versus this. So that done. Then you do some. You also do this globally. Let's do done. Let's open another one. Might have to put this below. Should. I need to remove enum, whatever it is, until I see this spec. There's a space. And I think this should be escaped. Just replace it with this. Do this globally. Except this is because this is not comma separate. Need to do something else here so that I mean an easy trick is that I put a comma. It's just going to keep. I could put an optional either comma or this. Exactly, let's see. It's close enough. I'll put the code slate. Maybe I'll fix it. And if we are going into this much trouble, what else can? What we need to do is this. Should make the enums var. All the enums. Do a capturing group here. We do var $1 equals. How we do it. Then I'll just do lowercase. Take this. That's it. Okay. And then each one will have I'm not going to create var vegetable, var tool, var structure, because these are essentially the model we are. It is actually not set yet. This is the whole point of this. But on tools, save it, equipment. Still not quite there. Thing there. String. Double check. What am I doing? Equipment. Even though I'm still giving this, which is failing here. It's the fact that it's never giving print value. What is more? The one. What is the value model? See, those are checked against this because those are followed like this. I think they might also be checked against strings. I think it's really the most crucial. Holy moly. They're always checked against strings because those strings are the names that are. I was always checking. The variables are referenced after the fact, but only if they are actually found as the result of a string. Not that I'm still suggesting I go back to the enum model, right? Because I think this is really the main culprit. Really okay with this too. This is easier to read than it's going to be. For each word, you just have to do more. It's a sore point. So then, if the property is model type, and this model type is actually a string, when we get the property, and the fact that the value is 0 makes me think, well, what is actually just an empty string? This is actually be really dropped the ball. Remembered everything else. This just looked up. Yay! We have the list of tools as a result of equipment planting. So here are this is cool. Took an extra half an hour. We got it. And now we have a much more solid. These names should be set. Now we can actually move forward. We actually get to 5 too. Now I get to the point of like, okay, now that this is working, really need these cases. Zip to use, which is default, saying that. that. Way until this by simple, simple. So I was right about this. The example I saw, they were sticking this. Each if something is set, did it anyway. Actually, I think the main reason is that this is also called for other reasons. If only your variables are, that is maybe the. I believe you have hundreds of things here that are coming from game engine itself. Maybe you only want to update it with your own variable change when kernel mechanism for those specific variables. Side. Now, there's a reason why I did not make plant or pepper, like I did not make it file title case, is because my models are already. I'll have to change everything accordingly. So the next thing is um, so just pushing the envelope. I now keep a separate list that only says tools and structures. Why can't planting be getting greedy here? Why can't dictionary where equipment is their tools or structure? Either. And a third one. Instead of rendering this model types, I save this script. What is this going to? What is the join method today? Such thing join as values or keys. Hit them. Essentially, they are an array of string, which is that it might. This is where I do not use tools, structures. This is where I was doing push workflow, pull, string array, okay, and then join here after the. Let's never rule out this tool structures. What are you? So we do not need the value. Right in my. Here's the problem though. This is going to fail against the check. This is no longer a string because value that's coming here is kind of weird. So let's actually look at that value. What is the? This is now going to fire because now it's solid model type string. But what is the value that's it's null in? Actually property here model type, that much value is not do this. It's planting. Okay, that's actually interesting because by default it did stand equipment show that now. This actually should be a string as if you're actually doing like just as now everything will work to a certain extent. It's actually cool because now we are actually keeping in correct utilization and update mode. Okay. This simplifies. Wow. Like I said, I didn't want to create a because if I create tools and structures separate, so that it means that while when equipment is chosen, that array should be broken down. Similarly, planting the vegetables are smashed. And for vegetables, your own list. Trying to do, but I didn't want to create multiple any more arrays. Now, to be honest, you really want to abuse this system. These vegetables could be its own dictionary. Could go that way. And as long as things are in proper nested order and you write your if conditions, that model will work. Which is an interesting point because if you want to write fancy script variables that are conditional, you only need to keep a decent dictionary or a JSON file structure. And this is where you do your branching, which you have to do anyway, any model. Trying to formulate the next steps. And so we are at that point to make this a dictionary. It's actually missing or continue with the real work. We respond to these changes to the real operation. That is going to be triggered in some condition is will do, which is essentially cool. The way we started this interactive script yesterday was going to allow us to do the object interaction, but it is looking more and more like an editor tool that maybe the script should be labeled because this is has nothing to do with the game mechanics. This is more like a interactive factory. So okay, so that will be the decision and the work after to the break. But this time I'm not going to put the stream on pause. I'm going to stop streaming. I will eat something, collect myself, come back to this, maybe more or less. I need to determine a few things. So for the time being, bye and see you later.